Okay, well, good morning, everybody, and welcome to our webinar on how to get buy-in and during a technology project. My name is Alan Reed, and I'm a director at Get Savvy. We provide online self-paced project management training, as well as advice for ordinary business people faced with challenges of a technology project in their own organizations. This webinar is part of our ongoing education program to eliminate bad projects in the non-profit sector. This particular topic is very dear to my heart, as neglecting the actual stakeholders and users of a technology project during the project itself is the cause of many project failures, and it just keeps on happening. So I'm really delighted to be tackling that today. I'm also delighted to welcome a veteran of many projects and Hearts and Minds initiatives as well, Kelly Birmingham from the Royal British Legion. Good morning, Kelly. Do you mind introducing yourself and your role at RBL, please?
Not at all. Thank you, Alan. Good morning, everybody. My name's Kelly. I am the Head of Technology and Data Strategy at the Royal British Legion. So the Royal British Legion is the UK's largest military charity supporting veterans and serving personnel in the armed forces. And I have a team of IT business partners and IT project managers who work across the organisation on anything technology related.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Kelly. Okay, well, let's press on. So first of all, just a little bit of webinar etiquette. The session's going to be made available to everyone as a recording, and I'll send out the presentation as well. So please don't worry about scribbling notes and trying to capture everything. Just relax and enjoy the session. If you have any questions that you'd like to put to Kelly or myself about your own project or your own challenges, please drop them into the chat or the Q&A area throughout the webinar. We have a little Q&A session at the end, and we'll tackle questions that I hope will be of benefit to delegates on the webinar. After the webinar as well, we'll also be sending out some free resources. We'll be inviting you to join our Dear Savvy support group, if you like. It's where people post questions about their project management challenges or just vent about the obstructive stakeholders or unsupportive management teams or whatever their problems might be, and then we post answers and have a whole conversation about it. We'll invite you to that, and then we'll also send out some templates and some job aids that we think might be useful to you as part of your own project. So we'll send all of that out after the webinar. And all we ask in response is some feedback, please. We're crack addicts when it comes to feedback, so we'll give you an opportunity to provide that as well. So the agenda for today is really straightforward. We're off to a racing start. We've done our welcome and intros. The next part is understanding why staff motivation and buy-in is so important. Essentially, we want to get the point across that you don't really have a choice if you want a successful project, but to give sufficient time and energy and focus to bringing your stakeholders, your future users along with the project and not treat them as the traditional afterthought, which is often the case. So then we'll talk about the challenges of making that a reality. Why is it so difficult? Why is it so often neglected? Why do so many projects end up struggling because they've ignored the users all the way through? Then we'll get on to some practical tools that will help you get the best out of this situation, things that have been proven to work that really do make a difference when it comes to running a project in your own organization and getting everybody happily on board, getting everybody on the same page and throwing ideas into the table and engaging positively with the project. We've condensed a lot of that into some practical tips, which we will go through with you. And then we'll go through the Q&A. So please do put in your own questions, as I say, into the chat or the Q&A box. What we're also doing as part of this course is we're providing all attendees with 50% off our training course, which is called Managing Technology Change Projects for Business People, which has been accredited by the Institute of Leadership, the International Association for Project Management, and CPD UK. We've had literally thousands of people go through this course, and it's essentially takes you through every step of a technology project in your own organization in self-paced kind of half-an-hour chunks, telling you everything you need to know. the most common feedback we get from people who've taken the course is, I so wish I'd done it before I did my last project. It would have saved me so much trouble. So we'll send you that at the end of the webinar. So without further ado, let's press on. So in terms of understanding the importance of staff motivation, let's just understand that particularly within the not-for-profit sector, change is pretty much a constant thing. Our external stakeholders, our members, our supporters, are getting ever more demanding all of the time, which means that charities, membership organizations, unions, etc., are forever having a churn on their systems. You're having to put in new websites, new CRM, new marketing and engagement tools, new analysis tools. It's pretty much constant. It's an incredibly innovative sector. And we've got to get the recognition across to management teams and people who are paying for these projects that it's not just about the technology. It's about ensuring that your team and actually your external stakeholders as well embraces the change and thrives alongside the change. So in today's session, what we're going to talk about is hands-on strategies, really proven techniques to ensure user adoption and stakeholders are brought into the project. Have your staff feel like they're part of the process, not something that someone else is doing and someone else's problem, and therefore drive your positive outcomes from your technology projects. So first of all, then, understanding the importance of staff motivation and putting the extra effort in, because don't mistake this for a second. All of the things that Kelly and I are going to be talking about today, they take a lot of extra effort over and above the technology project. It costs money to do this because time is money. So understanding why it's so important is really key, because you're going to have to persuade people probably to help you with that initiative. So staff motivation, we're clear, is essential for the success of a project. If you just go, ta-da, here is your new way of working and your new changes to all of your business processes, staff will reject it. They'll carry on working the way they've always worked, and essentially your project will have achieved nothing. So it's important to recognize that the work to bring people along with your project has to come from within the organization. There's a common misperception that you've chosen a supplier and they're going to help you and motivate the staff, and that's their job because it's all part of the project. That's categorically mistaken. Your supplier will help you deliver the technology. They don't really care, with the greatest respect to suppliers, about how motivated your staff are or what kind of take-up and buy-in you get from the systems. That's not their problem. So as the leaders of nonprofits, as project managers, you have to recognize it's your job and no one else's to secure the benefits from the project, to get people on board, to have people working with this thing that you're spending so much money on. The supplier will not do it for you. Then, of course, understanding that motivated employees are much more engaged. They'll throw their ideas in. They'll tell you where they think something isn't working early so that you can fix it. And the research shows very, very strongly that motivated staff will help you get benefits out of your project and a lot more value from the money that you're spending. So investing in staff motivation, you can foster this culture of collaboration and innovation. Your systems are only as good as the degree of take-up you're getting from them. So in order to have any value out of this money, you've got to have your staff throwing in with you and using it and getting ideas about how to get the best out of it. So let's talk about the challenges. Why is it so difficult? Why are these problems happening over and over? So what we've got is, first of all, people really tend to forget why they're doing the project in the first place. I can't overstate how common this is. So think about your own projects. Think about how you describe your own project. I think there's a fighting chance that you probably describe your own project as, oh, the new membership system, the new fundraising system, the new website project. And the focus right away is on just changing a piece of technology from an old piece of technology to a new piece of technology. And actually, that's not why you're doing this. It's easy to forget where the reason and the benefits come from on your project. So we want to make some really clear points, which is a kind of stark statement, which is to get people to recognize that the only source of benefits from your project is in changing how people work. So we want to make the point that changing a website itself is no benefit. Changing a CRM system from an old one to a new one is no benefit. If your staff carry on working in the old way, if your external stakeholders can't do things in a better way than they were able to do it before. So technology itself is not a benefit. So once you recognize that your only source of benefits is that crowd of already busy people and people who might be slightly obstructive and people who are not particularly interested in the project, once you recognize that they're your only source of benefits, it then makes sense to focus the project around getting the benefits out of that crowd and stop just focusing on the tech. So your choice is really simple when it comes to this stuff. You can finish your project with either low benefits, people working in the old ways and working around your new tech, or you can finish it with high benefits, with people embracing the technology and changing how they work and saving time and able to do new things. So the choice is yours. And what determines that is how you engage with people throughout the project. That's what will determine the difference between a successful high benefits project and an unsuccessful low benefits project. And a side note on that is it's really important to make sure that your management team understand this difference. That's why you need this extra time and resource. That's why all of this work is required, and that's why it needs their ongoing involvement in the project. So Kelly, do you mind if I just ask you a little bit about this? What are your thoughts on recognizing that changing how people work is really the source of benefits for a project? Is that your experience as well?
Yeah, absolutely, Alan. And I think, quite often in technology projects specifically, you will think about a potential cost saving from a solution and maybe a support perspective, if indeed that's the case, or how you're rationalising the IT estate. The benefits can be quite IT focused when you are delivering a technology project. But I think the real benefits, as you've said, come from getting people to work differently. And quite often that's the hardest part, isn't it? Sometimes it's a culture shift, be that a more efficient process, a safer process, legal compliance, whatever it is. There's absolutely no point having a brand new shiny solution that you spend a lot of time, money and effort in implementing if people are ultimately resistant to working in the new way. And if they don't use a solution, then it means you're not achieving your aims in the first place. So yeah, absolutely, I agree with that completely.
And do you feel as well that it's relatively little understood? When you say your only source of benefits is from your staff,
Mm-hmm.
do you think most management teams, in your experience, do you think they understand that before you start kind of waving your arms about and telling them about it?
Well, I think sometimes it's not thought about at all, or it's only considered towards the end of the project, right at the last minute. So in some cases, and I have worked on projects where you go back into a post-implementation review and the organisation have set up a myriad of spreadsheets because they're so disengaged with the solution. They've gone back to the old ways of working, etc. So it's about recognising it right at the very beginning, isn't it? That is your only source of benefit, and how do you bring people along on that journey with you? It's no good realising it the day before go live and then scrambling to try and make efforts towards it. It needs to be throughout the entirety of the project, starting at the very beginning.
I love that. You're so right. That kind of we see it over and over again. That it's running up towards the UAT, the testing phase. It's running up towards the go live. Oh, what about that lot? Or they're complaining because it doesn't really do what they want, and so on. And then it's too late to fix it. And what we see is, yes, there's a lot of activity at that stage, and maybe a lot of blaminess. But then I've seen, and maybe you have as well, people essentially have to run the project again after go live because they all of these things have been forgotten. It doesn't really fit the staff, or even if it does fit the staff, they're unhappy because of the way that they've been introduced to the systems. So yes, I love that point. Okay, so then tech projects often face these kind of challenges. Let's talk a little bit more about why it is so difficult. So first of all, it is hard for employees, for staff to change. Very often, people are engaged in how they're doing their job. They're very busy. There can be a lot of anxiety about being exposed, to not really knowing what they're talking about, or to new technologies. there is genuinely an increased workload. Let's just accept it that during the project, already busy people, because your best people are the ones that everyone gives work to all of the time. So they get busier and busier, and they're the ones you want on your project as well. So they're the ones that you're going to be adding more work to as part of the project, because you want them in meetings to help you agree what the requirements are, how good the fit is. Have you got any ideas for how to improve how we do that? So it is going to add to the workload, and people don't like having their workload added to, and sometimes they're just not available. Staff worry about security. They worry about their role within the organization. Often the benefits of a project are going to be closer collaboration, breaking down barriers between teams, but they worry about their job security. You keep talking about streamlining and saving time. Sometimes they feel like you're just handing them a P45. So, when you're talking about the project, so all of that needs to be tackled as well. So really, unless you're getting on ahead of these things and recognize the importance of getting your staff motivated and helping them relax and focus on the benefits of the project, you are going to have these problems. And Kelly, can I ask from your own experience, people are just saying, I'm just too busy, I haven't got time for this. Do you come across that?
Yeah, absolutely. And we there has to be a recognition that people have got their day jobs to do, and it's not as simple as going to them one day and saying, we've got a project to deliver, can I have you on the project team? We have to recognize that requires some planning and some negotiation from the management team about the priority of the project as well. So if we really want to deliver this, and it's one of our strategic aims or one of our business goals to deliver the project, how invested are they in enabling their staff to take part in the project and really be a part of it? So I think that has to be a conversation right at the very beginning as you're planning what you are going to do on the project. It can't be an afterthought to expect people to essentially double the workload and be okay with it. It can cause a lot of stress.
Exactly. And that reference to the management team, I think, is really, really important, because you can't solve it by just going to the busy person and shouting at them, waving your arms around in front of them. It's just not going to work. Great. So let's talk about the best tools for motivating them. If we're not going to just shout at them and wave our arms around, what are we going to do? And by the way, thank you very much. We've got a Q&A question coming in. And then if please do carry on dropping Q&A questions into the chat, so that we can tackle those as part of that part of the webinar for your own benefit. Okay, so the best tools for motivating staff. Let's have a conversation about that. So what we've found is that there's some fundamentals that have to be embraced as part of that. So part of it is around clear communications. Now, what the most common model for a project is that you send out a comms email every 2 weeks that absolutely no one reads. So just accept it in your heart of hearts. No one is reading your comms emails about the project. It's not enough. It's not going to work. So we've got some technologies and techniques to over and above the comms email, but just understand the importance of clear communications all of the way through. So that essentially what we're talking about is keeping everyone informed about the goals, what's expected of them, how long it's going to take. If it's going to take a year, tell them it's going to take a year. Tell them, how much of their time is going to be required and at what phases. That second bullet point is incredibly important. So communicating the benefits of the project to them. It's hard to overstate that people are very, very supportive of their organization, and they want their organization to do well. But when it comes to this kind of project, people think it's nothing to do with them, essentially. Or I'm sure everybody knows what they're talking about. I don't have to put my time into it. So communicating why it's going to help them, that it's going to save them time, it's going to stop them having to do the kind of rote mechanical work, and then be able to focus more on the human side or the bits of the job that they enjoy, to be able to support their members or volunteers better, whatever it may be. Those are the things that will motivate people to get involved. Keep people up to date. Be honest with your updates. If things are delayed, tell them so. Don't just sugarcoat everything. and be very, very transparent about what's working and not's working to keep everyone aligned and supportive. Also, it's vital to talk about this as something that you're doing with your stakeholders and not at them. Bear in mind that the people who are doing the job today know a lot more about the job than you do. They know a lot more about the opportunities. They know a lot more about what could be improved and what would really make a difference. So your job typically as a management team, as a project manager, is to facilitate your stakeholders in being able to take part in the project and make decisions every stage of the project, all of the way through. If you do it at them, they will tend to ignore you, and then we'll have the problems that we've talked about early. So find your champions, find your stakeholders who are enthusiastic, and get them involved, and get them involved in the decision making. Once somebody has made a decision on a project, or contributed to a decision and seen that decision enacted, they're on board. You know, they are there. Support, they are now your supporters for the project. Recognize people's role in it. We know lots and lots of thanking, lots and lots of positivity around it. They might sound a little bit cheesy, but actually it's a huge part of bringing people along with you on the project. Project after project has the little project team in a huddle with the supplier and ignoring the external stakeholders. And no surprises then when people don't engage fully with your project after that. And then training and support is too commonly thought of as something that is happening right at the end of the project, as Kelly was saying earlier. We find that doesn't work very well. It's something that's got to be done as the system builds and evolves with your stakeholders, so that people are able to give feedback, so are able to say, well, you know, you forgot this, or what about that, and can we have some more help on that? People have got to be involved in developing the training and support model, and then encourage open feedback. So one of the most important things we find is providing a channel where people can say what they're worried about, say what they think you've forgotten, so that they can identify issues early. And your contract is, if you raise something, then we will address it. You know, we'll give you a response, we'll address it, we'll respond to it. It doesn't mean we'll solve it immediately or we'll change the project, but we will always engage with it. Your role is to always make sure, as a staff member or team member, is always to flag things so that we can resolve it. So Kelly, if you don't mind, I just wanted to ask, from your experience, what might you have found have worked in terms of involving staff in the decision making on throughout the project, not just at the kind of vendor selection stage or you know, right at the end on training? How have you found involving staff in decision making can work on the ground, please?
I think it's absolutely key. And I think, you know, if we think about a technology project, quite often there's a perception from staff in an organisation that, as you said, technology is done to them, not with them. So I think first and foremost, bringing people along on this journey and being involved in the decision-making process right from the beginning is sometimes a bit of a culture shift for them. But genuinely something that people do want to get involved with. And I think it's really empowering for them to be involved in the project right from the very beginning, on the ground, making those decisions that can help shape the future of the project and the future of how you work as an organisation. I think linking that back to a really clear vision, Alan, is actually really powerful as well. So a vision that you're all bought into, that you're all invested in making happen. And I think that sense of ownership actually is really important. You know, we are standing side by side trying to make this happen. We are not, as an IT team, trying to do this to you. You are absolutely part of the team who are trying to make this a success. So that sense almost of ownership and pride in making it a success is really important. And you can get that by involving them in the decision-making process. And as you said, there's an acknowledgement there that they will always know more than you do about how they work, about the processes, about the challenges they make. And I think, again, it might sound a little bit cheesy, but acknowledging that to them, to say, you know, you are the experts in this field and we absolutely are reliant on you contributing to and feeding into this, and we will look to you to make some of these decisions. I think a point on this as well, which is really important to consider, is making sure that your staff are truly empowered to make those decisions. So whether that be, you know, they are there as a trusted deputy from an exec sponsorship perspective. I think what can sometimes upset that cycle is where those decisions are being second guessed, sometimes by an executive sponsor. So it's really important upfront to make sure that your staff are actually empowered to make the decisions, and they'll feel motivated to do so throughout.
I really like that. What, let me ask you a question that has a slightly negative tone to it.
Mm.
Uh, One of the things that's quite hard to get staff to focus on is the UAT phase, when we get
Mm-hmm.
very intensive. You know, things are not working perfectly. That's the whole point of UAT. One of the points I try and get across, you know, gently to staff, is that you are responsible. Now, this can be a terrifying thing but it taps into your ownership thing. Um, you are responsible for making sure this is going to work for your business area. We as a project team can facilitate that. We can serve up the thing so that you can evaluate it, but ultimately we can't say it works for your business area.
Mm-hmm.
Only you can do that.
Mm-hmm.
How have you found people? Would you try and get that across to people? It's your responsibility to sign it off, or do you find people run for the hills when you try and get that kind of message across to people?
I guess it depends on when you engage them in the UAT process. So, you know, again, UAT sometimes is a bit of an afterthought, and you dedicate a couple of days to it. Sometimes it's a bit of a tick in the box to say you've done it, the system's been tested. You don't give it the gravitas that it deserves, you know, because you are, at the end of the day, that is one of your go live decisions, that UAT has been signed off by the organisation. I think if they're not involved in that process adequately enough, you will absolutely get the case where people back off from that responsibility and say, I don't feel comfortable signing that off because I've only tested it for half a day or whatever. So it's about making sure you give yourself enough time to do thorough testing, that you are saying to the staff, you know, we are using your expertise in the process to tell us if it's not working and we can do something about it. Involving them throughout that whole process. And I think then they will feel more empowered and more reassured that actually the sign off is something they can feel comfortable about, because they've been given the time to be able to do testing effectively. But trying to squeeze testing into a couple of days never flies in my experience. I think you spend more time then going back and fixing it after go live, or maybe not going live at all. And then obviously if you push out your go live date, people lose confidence in the project and confidence in the delivery. So yeah, UAT is really important to give people that enough time to feel comfortable that what they're signing off is then not going to come back on them and beat them around the head with it.
You know, I think that is incredibly fair. Essentially, if what you're saying is, if you give them enough, if you give them enough time and you do it
Mm-hmm.
fairly well, then you can give them the responsibility and say it's your
Mm-hmm.
responsibility to sign it off. If you don't, then yes, you have to be realistic about that. Great, thank you very much. Okay, so let's move on to uh, essentially one of the most common problems that happens during the project in terms of involving the staff. So Kelly, is my screen still working correctly when I'm moving
Yeah.
through? Yep, very good, very good. Okay, so what happens over and over is essentially you start the project, everyone's got really good intentions for staff buy-in, everyone gives it really good lip service and says, yeah, we must have buy-in, we've got to involve the staff. And then what happens is you run the vendor selection, and there's still really good intentions. You know, you talk to the supplier, yes, we must get all of the staff and have them motivated throughout. So intentions are still good. And then what happens from there is essentially your tech suppliers are chosen. You send out a big announcement email, marvelous, we're all underway, exciting things are going to happen. And then basically through the longest stage of your implementation, which might be 9 months, it might be 12 months, the staff are ignored for the great majority of the project. Everybody goes into a huddle about the technology. Every time there's a problem with the data migration or the integration or the configuration, the staff are completely ignored because all of that costs time and money. And we must get together and figure that out. And that's the only thing that matters. So you ignore your staff for all of that period. Then you drag a few of them into UAT. where they haven't seen this thing for, haven't been involved in it. As Kelly says, quite often it's a really compromised process of only a few days or maximum of a week or so. It goes wrong because this is the first time people have seen stuff. It's been developed in a vacuum away from real staff and their users. Delays and disputes. Somehow people muddle through that, and then there's a go live, which is just crash bang wallop, because you launch it to a whole bunch of people who've had a half a day training maybe weeks earlier, or a day's training weeks earlier, and then they're expected to change the entirety of how they work, and they either reject the system or work around it. So Kelly, this model of asking people what they want in the requirements phase and then ignoring them for a year, I dare say you've never seen anything like that happening, have you?
Oh, I've seen it time and time again, Alan. Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, it's a culture that you build up around technology delivery that means it persists. You don't understand your lessons learned. You don't take credence of the lessons learned. So you are just stuck in this cycle of delivering things over and over again like this. So I think going through all these different points, a project maybe potentially is under-resourced, so the project manager's having to coordinate all the effort, but they're often expected to do the change management and the comms as well. As you've said, it can be a quick email every couple of weeks that people are not going to read. It's not seen as sometimes a separate role that's needed in an organisation to really manage that change and those comms. We also don't fully consider how much of people's time we might need to make it a success. And in an ideal world, we absolutely will have staff involved at all stages in the project, but there's a recognition there, as we said before, that it takes them away from the day job, so they can't fully commit unless you can second them to the project, for example, and backfill their role. And that's a decision again that the management layer needs to commit to and understand. And that comes back to how much of a priority the project is. As we've said, you find yourself up against it from a timing perspective, especially if you are delivering in traditional waterfall methodology. So quite often that UAT and that training is rushed, not very well represented from a business perspective. And I think quite often aggressive timelines are sometimes really pushed without people really understanding the risks involved as to what can happen. And then you get to this point where it's finally understood, usually just before go live. And as I've said, you can make the decision to just go live and then deal with all the problems that come out of all of that. But then you might decide to extend the go live date, which can cause even more problems. So you're kind of stuck in this cycle.
Exactly.
For forever just delivering these projects that don't succeed.
Exactly. And so what we're going to talk about is how not to have this happen, what you should be doing all the way through the project. But I think it's worth recognizing as well the different agendas of your stakeholders in the project. So I'm not talking negatively about suppliers, but it is worth recognizing that suppliers' main goal of the project is to get you live, because that means their liability is now achieved. They have no liability anymore because you're live. You can't get your money back, etc., etc. You can't complain to them because you've said I'm going to use it. So your very first keystroke in your new system that you're not repeating in your old system, you're live. But of course, for your agenda as a membership organization or a charity, that's not the project delivered for you. So it's worth recognizing that your supplier will have that agenda. The agenda for getting the benefits out of this project has to come from the user side, from the customer side. And if you fail to deliver these kind of benefits all of the way through the project, we get back to what Kelly was saying earlier. You do all of this thing in the last few weeks, the project doesn't go live very well, people don't accept it very well. And then you end up solving all of the problems after go live when your supplier has had their money and they're not in project mode anymore. So any more of their time you need is extra cost. You try and suck it through the help desk and that doesn't work either. And of course, your project team have probably disbanded and gone off to other projects. So essentially involving your staff and your stakeholders at every stage in doing mini QAs throughout the project is how you best protect yourself from those kind of problems. So let's talk a little bit more about that. So recognizing that this kind of cultural change and involving staff involves gets you your collaboration, gets you your project benefits. But also it's worth recognizing that it delivers your own benefits to you as a management team, as a project team, recognizing that your staff are your best source of ideas. They're your best source of improvements for the project, but they're also your vital safety net. If you're going to find out that people are not going to use this thing, let's find out early. Let's not find out at the go live stage. Let's not find out after the project team has disbanded and all of the money has been spent. So essentially, what we strongly recommend is that as the system is emerging, that you're showing it to people, even in its roughest state, to your best supporters. You're asking them for feedback. You're asking them for what we've forgotten. You're saying, is this looking like something you could use to do your job? And from doing that almost from week one, you're essentially protecting yourself from all of these kind of problems. Then the final point there is one, Kelly, that you made earlier. If you're involving people, then you're getting that sense of ownership. The word I've used there is less likely to complain. Maybe I'm just looking for a less moany environment. But actually, going back to your point there, I think people are more likely to embrace changes to how they work if you've consulted them earlier. I think that's your experience as well. Great. Okay, so onto there to some specific hints and particular action points that people should take to avoid these bad things happening to you on your project. So first of all, identifying your key stakeholders. Don't be the Lone Ranger on this project. As Kelly, you just mentioned a second ago, as a project manager who's also responsible for all of the communications, also responsible for the change management and bringing people involved on that. I think you might agree that if you're in that position, you're probably not going to do a good job on all of these bits.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you'll start with the best intentions, and you will, maybe create a comms plan and things like that. But it's very difficult to follow through on all those plans when you are trying to coordinate everything. You just don't have the time to spend on that. And I think, as we've seen throughout various projects, it's the one thing that can make or break the project is how you communicate with your staff and bring them on board with you. So it's a vital ingredient that's missing. And quite often on technology projects, the focus, as we've said throughout all this, is on the technology and not on the people. And that is a mistake.
Absolutely. And recognizing that your stakeholders include the management team. Include others within the organization that can be roped into helping you deliver the project. We've got a really good Q&A question about what do you do in someone in your position, Kelly, who has hundreds of stakeholders, 500,000 members, 500,000 or millions literally of donors for the Poppy campaign. You can't just get them all in a room. Let's come back to that on the Q&A. I'm really looking forward to that one. Okay, so then we have clearly communicate. We've talked about that, but talking about the benefits of the project, how it aligns with your organizational goals and priorities, helping your staff understand the why we're going about this. We're not just rushing out to spend money and make your life hell. There's a why to why this project is involved, and keep repeating that all of the way through. Addressing concerns. People will have objections. Sometimes they're just because they don't like the change, but a lot of the time, most of the time, they are genuine. So addressing them will help you, and sharing those things will help you all of the way through. And that engagement of staff all of the way through is vital. So what we find really makes a difference is things like having Q&A sessions with different teams on the way through. So this is the operational teams that tend to be smaller than your major audience. Creating content that is easy to consume in a minute or two. Having lunch and learns, having little sessions where people can engage and ask questions themselves. All of those things make a big difference. Okay, so some practical hands-on things that we find are really important. So first of all, I would say a really key thing here is starting with the management team. It's very often the case that the management team might act like they've, just hired a cleaner or something, and everything is their job, and they just kind of stand back and watch it all happen. Um, and as a project manager, and as someone on the management team in the delegates here, it's vital to understand it cannot work like that and will not work like that. So, Kelly, could I just get your thoughts on engaging with the management team, and how do you get what are your thoughts on getting the best support from them?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think sometimes it starts with, whatever the governance structure in your organization looks like, and how you engage an executive sponsor. That's what we call them at the Royal British Legion. They are part of the executive board. They have a vested interest in projects being successful because it helps us achieve our strategic aims. So I think it's about involving them. Maybe they are part of the project or program board that you run on a monthly basis potentially. But I think those roles and responsibilities, that racing matrix that you create right at the very beginning, is really important, and you can keep coming back to that to say, as a member of the management team or that exec board, wherever they sit, these are your responsibilities as part of the project, and you will help us make this project a success, and they need to really understand that and buy into it. And I think maybe where you have, sometimes you will get a disengaged sponsor for the project. That is a risk that needs raising really early on, because that's where, decisions then become bottlenecked. You can't move forward without that support. As you've said, Alan, there are so many things throughout a project that we need to raise to the attention of the management team if things are going wrong, that at that point, if they're disengaged, there's almost no point carrying on with the project, because they need to be the driving force behind it.
Absolutely. And there's a key thing, I think, any people who find themselves lumbered with a project, or the people who didn't duck out the way fast enough when the management team said, "Oh, you're responsible for changing this system. I know you've got a full-time job, but we're going to put you in charge of doing this." Anyone who finds themselves in that position, please give yourself a break and recognize you as a project manager are nobody's boss. You as a project manager do not have the authority to commandeer people's time and tell them to change their priorities, and to tell them to stop focusing on the annual conference and start focusing on your project. You do not have that authority, and it is not your job to tell them that. Only the management team can do that. So one of the earliest things anyone who's responsible for a project should do is you always start by saying, do I have what I need to make this a success in terms of time, money, and support from the management team? So there has to be a meeting with your management team, in particular your main sponsor within the management team, where you are saying, here is what I need from you. I need, and your role as a management team is to support the project manager, support the project manager, support the project manager. I need you to lend me your authority, where you're actually saying to people, we will treat this project as the organization's #1 priority, if that's the case. We expect you to support it. So when Kelly comes around and asks you for your time, you can negotiate with Kelly about when, but you cannot say no. You're not allowed to say, I won't put my time into this. So you want your most senior person that you could find to be communicating that very clearly to the organization, so that Kelly wouldn't need any help with this necessarily, but someone in your position as a delegate might. When you go back and say, listen guys, words are cheap. People are telling me they're too busy. You've told them this is the #1 priority. I need your help to resolve this. So I need you to attend a meeting with me. I need you to run a town hall with me. I need you to send a communication. We've had the most successful projects where people have literally put the requirement to support the project into people's appraisals. So we are going to appraise people on how they made this. We've had people say, we will allow you to let your day job slip in order to focus on the project. And your role as a project manager is only to go to the management team and make them do it, because you don't have the authority yourself. Don't take that problem into your own heart. It's not something you can resolve without their help. And as Kelly says, if they're not responding, then you have to be upfront and say, I cannot deliver this project with this little support from the management team. I'm afraid it's not going to work. That is your job to say that, if that's the case. Okay. So the next thing is to allow for the extra work and resource required. The motivating your staff, if you're not just going to send a comms email every 2 weeks, and you're doing it properly. Kelly, would you put a number to it? How much of your time as a project manager or within the project management team, as a percentage of the overall time you're putting in? Let's say that the technology project and managing the supplier and all of that data migration and integration and configuration stuff is consuming 5 days a week of your time. So it's a full-time job. How much on top of that would you say you would ideally have for managing all of these communications, having these workshops with people, solving the obstruction problems, having the motivation meetings? How much of your time on top of that 5 days a week for one person would you ideally have in that scenario?
Probably an extra 5 days a week, Alan.
Really?
Yeah, and I think that's a recognition, is that it's a full-time job and it absolutely shouldn't be an afterthought. And you know, you could argue it depends on the project size, it depends what you're doing, etc. But I think for a really successful system implementation, for an easy example, I think sometimes there's a perception that, oh, we're just implementing a system, it'll kind of all work out, people get trained, whatever. And you're missing the fundamental part of it there, is that the change management is absolutely appropriate for technology projects. And you know, a lot of organizations have a change manager. They have one singular change manager, who I always think must be extremely busy if there's lots of projects going on. Maybe you don't need an official change manager, but you need somebody, I think, to take on that role in a project to help you with it all, because I think it's a full-time job to do it well.
Absolutely. And then I couldn't agree more. So in the reality for most people on the webinar, unfortunately, and I'm guessing this is probably the case on most of your projects too, you're not given another full-time resource
Yeah.
to manage this. And this is where one of the main problems comes in. And this is why change management always gets thrown under the bus as soon as there is a technology problem. In the course I was talking about managing technology change projects for business people, we have an entire module on change management and how to get support for change management and what it means on the ground at every phase of the project, right from the beginning and all of the way through. Now, specific points that you should make sure you are achieving in terms of getting this extra resource. First of all, recognize that it is extra work over and above the technology project that most people think of as project management. So one of your main sources of resource is to go to your project sponsor, first of all, and it's then say, look, you are not just a figurehead. You're not just the one who's going to get all of the credit after I've done all of the work. I need you to do these meetings. I need you to write these emails, or at least send them out after I've written them. And I need you to tackle obstructions for me when I've got blockers and problems. So that's one resource that you should have, because it's their project, not yours. You know, they're the ones who will get the benefits from the project and who spent all of the money. Also, it's worth trying to get things like, are there marketing and comms resources within your organization that you can draw into the project and ask for extra help? So to write communications, to write the messaging, to attend these meetings, to manage the feedback and queries area, so they're serving questions up to you and answering repeated questions themselves. Those kind of things make a huge amount of difference. And then all of the way through, we've been talking about finding your champions group, finding your stakeholders who are positive about the project, give them work to do. They will feel part of the project. They will embrace having work to do. So that means running workshops, running mini training sessions, you know, lunch and learns, train the trainer. The more you're doing with those groups and the more positivity is going out and the less it's being left to you. Because as Kelly has just made very clear, you're likely to not do it, particularly during busy phases when you're having some kind of technology problem or the supplier has let you down or something along those lines. Okay, moving along. Don't just focus on the technology. I'll say this. I think we'll just do this really briefly. We've already talked about it, so let's just move on from there. Don't allow this project to be treated as a technology project. It's a change project with technology as a major element of it. If you focus on it as a technology project, you will fail because your users will just carry on working the way they always have. They'll bounce off and reject the system. Don't be the Lone Ranger. Kelly, can I ask, in terms of RBL projects or Royal British Legion projects, which are obviously bigger than many and they're not-for-profit sector, how have you gone about finding your tribe? finding your family within the project? What steps have you taken to do that?
So I think, there's a piece that you need to do at the very beginning of the project. Good old stakeholder mapping is one of my favorite tools, where you are actively thinking about who needs to be involved in this project, and involved probably in different layers as well. So who needs to be your core team? Who do you need to consult? Who do you need to inform? All depending on their influence and their power within the organisation. And I think that's a really useful tool that sometimes is overlooked. I think you can sometimes fall into the trap of picking the same people that you always work with in the business, for example, who have potentially made things a success in the past, but you're missing some vital expertise if you do that, I think. So stakeholder mapping, identifying who you need to bring along on this journey. I think a really important point, as you've mentioned, Alan, is harnessing people's passion for making things a success in terms of that change champion network. And I've worked on projects in the past, huge projects, where the change champion networks are invaluable to the success of the project, because they are your boots on the ground. They will have their ears open. They can be almost a feedback mechanism a lot of the time to bring things to you that you don't necessarily hear about if you're working with a huge group of people. But they can also help you cascade communications. They can help people for the post go live phase, etc. So I think identifying really good people across the organisation who want to be involved at that level, make it really clear to them again that it's a role. The change champion is a role. So you might need to stick on them to the project, and we've talked about how we get management buy-in for that potentially. So yeah, I think it's identifying and harnessing those people who are able to make that happen with you.
Fantastic. And recognizing you can't do it yourself. As you just said
Mm-hmm.
as well, there's a post go live element as well.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't want your post go live to be a bunch of shouting and complaints about how you ran the project, even if the technology works, you'll still get shouting and complaints because people haven't been involved. You need that family of stakeholders to minimize that and to help manage that all the way through. Great, thank you. And then as well, be creative. So this is getting away from the kind of sending out a comms email every 2 weeks and thinking of it as job done. And maybe getting ahead of our Q&A question as well about how do you engage with large groups of people. I've worked on a project with Girl Guiding with over 100,000 people that are Girl Guide volunteers, that work in every village and every town across the UK. How do you engage with those numbers of people? So in terms of being creative and doing more than just sending out the comms email, could I just ask what kind of things have you done in the past in terms of bringing people on board and keeping them up to date with the project when they're not reading your emails? What else can we be doing?
I think you mentioned some of them before, Alan, but I think road shows and town halls are a really good way of reaching a large amount of people. Road shows are actually really valuable if you have a product to demo, for example, and people can get excited about what you've been doing, and they can see it. I think if they've got something tangible that they can see, always excites people rather than the abstract. So that's a really good way of engaging a lot of people. If I give you an example of, we've got 6 care homes at the Royal British Legion, and on one of our large strategic programs that we've got going on, we had to get creative in terms of how we commed project progress out, because we recognised that the staff in those care homes were quite rightly focusing on delivering care to our residents. They weren't sat at a PC all the time, so those emails and those intranet posts wouldn't have hit that audience. So we created a newsletter with all the information in it, and it was printed out, posted on notice boards, cascaded through management meetings, etc. So it was just a slightly different way of delivering what would have otherwise potentially been an email rollout or a post on the intranet. I think lunch and learn sessions, drop-in sessions are always really useful, giving people, again, that space to be able to pick and choose a time when they want to engage with you is always good, rather than being quite rigid about you must attend this session, because again, people have got their day jobs to do, and you need to recognise that and be willing to work around it. So it is a lot of additional work, I think, as we've seen throughout this webinar. So yeah, there are various things you can do to engage large groups of people. And I guess, you know, from an organisational perspective, I think about our membership base. We've got a huge membership base, and if we're doing projects with membership, we know we need to engage with that membership base. And we can't speak to them all at the same time unless we put something at the annual conference. So we have a newsletter where we post project updates as well. So it's about, I guess, harnessing all those different network opportunities you've got in your organisation, and really thinking about how they can work for you to deliver your comms plan.
Fantastic. And something really briefly I've seen work really well and is increasing is the use of video when it comes to keeping people up to date. And don't think of this as some enormous barrier. Any 14-year-old seems to be able to create free videos and put them on TikTok. So what I've seen is people creating literally 30-second videos with a little bit of an update, or actually a little bit of a demo of here's how you do this in this software, or here's a new feature that's going to be available on the website. And they're sent out literally and build up a little bit of a library of 20-second videos. A staff member can create them for free with a half a day's training, and they're off and running. So there are mass media ways of getting these things out. Okay, I'm just going to go go ahead, and then the final thing really is just to wrap up and Q&A. Kelly, we've had a couple of Q&A questions come in. I'll send this out. So this is just summarizing the points that we've gone through. I just want to get to one or two Q&A questions before we run out of time. The last point on our summary here was about effective leadership and communication being key to motivating your staff. I think we should have that in spades. So on the Q&A, I've just got one question that I wanted to ask of you on it. So we've got a Q&A question, which is, what do you do if the staff just aren't interested? They think the project is your job, not their job. You can't get their time and attention. So what are your thoughts on how you tackle that reality?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question, and it happens kind of all the time. And I think it comes back to this, management team conversation that you need to have, Alan, and raising that risk or that issue. I think it's something that you can spot quite early on, by the way. With low engagement is quite easy to spot. I think you need to go back to the management team and raise it as a risk. I think they need to then commit to being able to empower the staff and get that interest and that engagement, help you get that interest and engagement back, focus on the benefits, and make it really clear that without people's time and people's energy and having them involved in the project, you absolutely will not be able to deliver those benefits. So it's almost a carrot and stick situation, I guess.
Yeah, I really like that.
Yeah.
And then I've just got one more because we're slightly overrunning. We've had a failed project in the past, and people are pretty burnt and skeptical of putting their time into it. Do you have any suggestions?
Yeah, and I think first and foremost, acknowledge the mistakes that you've made in the past. You will hopefully have done the lessons learned. I think lessons learned are, again, sometimes overlooked, but I think they're a really important tool that can help you not make the same mistakes again if you review them regularly and at the start of each project. So I think you are quite within your right to acknowledge the mistakes you've learned and say, but we are putting these mitigating actions in place. And I think that really emphasises the need for engagement as well. So that's where you need to focus your energy, spending time re-establishing the trust, re-engaging with people, understanding from their perspective what went wrong last time, and making the effort to make sure it doesn't happen again.
Fantastic. So everything we've been talking about, just more so, double necessary because of this being burnt. Great, thank you. So just to wrap up, we're going to provide the video of the webinar to everyone. We'll get that out over the next day or so. Please remember to fill out the feedback form, and we'll be providing the 50% discount code to the course. We'll provide the job aids and the templates. We'll invite you to join the Dear Savvy community. And then we look forward to in seeing you at the next webinar, which is on May 30th, where we're talking about the role of the senior management team in projects. We've been dobbing the senior management team all of the way through this webinar. So that webinar is about how you get it right as a senior management team and how you make sure you deliver. So I just want to say as a final thing, Thank you so much, Kelly. I'm so grateful for you putting your time into the webinar and giving us your fantastic insight. So thank you so much for that. I'm really grateful. Thank you very much for everyone attending. And we'll get back to you with your resources really shortly. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you, Ellen. Thank you, everyone. Bye.